The galaxy had always whispered of the Falari, a warrior race known for their strength and their iron code. They were beautiful and terrifying, creatures born with sharp ears, glowing eyes, and hearts trained to hate weakness. To them, humans were little more than fragile animals stumbling into a universe too dangerous for their kind. And among the Falari, none carried this hatred stronger than Liara, the commander's daughter, sworn to keep her people's pride unbroken. When the first shots of war erupted between the humans and the Falari, the stars themselves seemed to burn brighter. Fleets clashed, worlds shook, and soldiers died with no hope of mercy. The humans were outnumbered, their ships weaker, their technology behind. Yet they had something the Falari could never measure: willpower. Even when crushed, humanity rose, again. This puzzled Liara, though she would never admit it. In her eyes, humans should have broken long ago. The turning point came on a cold, distant moon, a place of jagged cliffs and endless storms. Liara's unit was sent to capture a human outpost rumored to hold vital intelligence. She led her warriors with fire in her blood, certain that humans would fall before her blade like they always did. But the outpost didn't collapse easily. Instead, a handful of humans stood against her army with desperate bravery, refusing to surrender even when their walls burned. In the chaos, one human stood out. He was not armored in gleaming tech or blessed with advanced weapons. He carried nothing more than a rifle scarred from battle, his skin smeared with dust and blood. But his eyes held something Liara could not ignore: defiance. When her soldiers stormed forward, he cut through them with a fury that seemed impossible for a species so weak. He shouted to his men, rallied them, and fought until the ground beneath him was painted red. For Liara, this was no ordinary opponent. She struck at him, expecting his body to break easily under her strength. Yet blow after blow he resisted. His muscles trembled, his breaths grew heavy, but he did not yield. For the first time in her life, Liara felt the sting of uncertainty. Who was this human who dared to stand before her? Why did he not fear death? The clash between them raged like a storm. Sparks lit the dark cavern as her blade clashed against his rifle, as though even the universe held its breath. Around them, soldiers screamed, ships burned, but the two fighters became the center of the war. She could have killed him with a single strike to the heart, yet something in his eyes stopped her. They weren't the eyes of prey. They were the eyes of a warrior equal to her, and then in a moment that would haunt her, he struck back. His weapon sliced across her armor, sending her stumbling for the first time. The world seemed to freeze. Her warriors gasped. A human had wounded her. Shame and rage filled her veins, yet beneath it burned a spark she had never known before: admiration. As the storm outside roared louder, Liara realized this was no ordinary battle. This was the beginning of something neither her people nor the humans could control. The battle on the stormy moon did not end that night, though Liara's warriors finally overran the human outpost. The image of that defiant soldier stayed fixed in her mind. He had been captured after exhaustion finally, dragged him down, his body bruised and bleeding but still alive. Many of her soldiers demanded his execution. To them, he was nothing more than a fragile human who had dared to raise his hand against a Falari commander. But Liara silenced them with a raised palm. She did not know why she stopped them. Perhaps it was honor. Perhaps it was curiosity. Perhaps it was something deeper she refused to admit. Whatever the reason, she ordered the man to be chained and brought to her command ship. The others grumbled but obeyed, for none dared to defy her. On the journey back, Liara walked the silent halls of her ship, her thoughts heavy. To her people, humans were beneath notice, yet this one human had shown her something different. His eyes, his refusal to surrender, the way he had cut down her warriors with sheer will, it disturbed her. She had sworn no human would ever touch her, yet she could not shake the memory of his strike against her armor. His touch had left a scar, not just on her skin but in her pride. The human, whose name she soon learned was Kale, was thrown into, the holding cells. Even in chains, he refused to bow his head. When Liara came to see him, he stood tall despite the blood on his face. His voice was hoarse, but steady. "You could have killed me," he said. "Why didn't you?" Liara's ears twitched, her glowing eyes narrowing. "Because I want to understand. You are weak. Your kind should break like glass. Yet you stood against me. Why?" Kyle gave a faint smile, one that carried no fear. "Because someone had to. We fight because we don't know how to stop. That's what it means to be human." Her chest tightened at his words, though she hid it well. She had heard many humans beg, cry, curse, but never speak with such steady conviction. He spoke as if his life was already spent, and yet his spirit burned like a star, refusing to go dark. Days passed, and Liara kept returning. At first she told herself it was interrogation. She demanded to know human tactics, strategies, weaknesses. But Kale never gave her secrets. Instead, he spoke of humanity, their struggles, their dreams, the way they built hope even in the ruins of war. And each time, she found herself listening more than she intended. Her soldiers began to whisper. Why did their commander keep a human alive? Why waste time speaking to prey? Liara ignored them, though the whispers grew louder. The truth she could not admit even to herself was that Kale's presence unsettled her. She was drawn to him, against everything she believed. One night, as the storms raged outside the ship's viewing ports, Kale asked her a question. "Do you ever wonder," he said softly, "if all this fighting is just fear dressed up as pride?" The words pierced her like a blade. Pride was the heart of the Falari. To question it was to question everything, and yet deep inside she felt the tremor of doubt. For the first time, Liara could not answer, and as silence filled the chamber, she realized something terrifying. She had sworn no human would ever touch her heart, her honor, or her soul. But Kyle had already done it, without even laying a hand. The days turned into weeks, and the war outside only grew worse. The Falari pushed deeper into human space, conquering outposts and scattering fleets. Victory seemed certain, yet Liara carried unease in her heart. It was not the humans' resistance that troubled her most, but the man locked within her ship. Kyle should have been broken by now. Any other prisoner would have collapsed under the weight of chains, the endless interrogations, the humiliation of captivity. But Kale did not. He carried himself with the same fire he had shown on the battlefield. When she looked into his eyes, she no longer saw weakness. She saw something her people had always denied humans possessed: strength. One evening, Liara entered the cell and found him standing at the bars, staring out at the cold stars beyond the window slit. He looked tired, his body worn, but his voice was steady when he spoke. "Tell me something," he said without turning. "Why do you hate us so much?" Liara stiffened. No human had ever dared to ask her such a question. Her voice came out sharp, like steel against stone. "Because you are fragile. You spread across the stars without power, without wisdom, and you think yourselves equal to us. My people were warriors before your kind even left your world. To us, humans are unworthy." Kyle finally turned, his gaze piercing into hers. Unworthy or dangerous? The word struck her harder than any blade. Dangerous. She remembered the outpost, the way humans fought even in the face of certain death. She remembered Kale's strike against her, the scar it left behind. Dangerous was not a word she would admit aloud, but it burned in her chest like a hidden truth. "You speak too boldly for a prisoner," she replied, her voice quieter now. "And you come here too often for someone who claims to despise me," Kale countered, his lips curling into the faintest smile. Her ears twitched in irritation, but she found no argument. She should have struck him down for his insolence. Instead, she turned away, leaving him in silence. Yet that night, sleep did not come easily. Kale's words echoed in her mind, and for the first time she wondered if her hatred was built not on truth but on fear. Fear that humans, fragile as they appeared, carried a power her people could not understand. The next battle came swiftly. Liara led her warriors to another human stronghold, confident that crushing it would erase the doubts festering in her heart. But the fight was brutal. The humans fought with a desperation that seemed almost reckless, and though the Falari won, the cost was higher than expected. Liara returned to her ship wounded, her body aching, her spirit unsettled. Kale was waiting in his cell, chained but watchful. When she passed by, he noticed the bandage on her arm. "They hurt you," he said simply. Liara glared at him. "Do not think that means anything. A scratch is nothing to a Falari." But Kale only shook his head. "No, it means everything. Because every wound you take is proof that we are not as weak as you think. And if your people keep underestimating mine, it will be the end of you." His words should have angered her, but instead they stirred something else. Respect. She hated herself for feeling it, but she could not deny it. That night, standing alone before the viewing glass of her ship, Liara whispered the truth she had never spoken aloud. "This war is not as simple as I thought." She did not know if Kale could hear her from his cell, but somewhere deep inside she felt that he already knew. The war pressed on, yet inside Liara's ship, another kind of battle was unfolding, one that raged within her heart. She had been raised to see humans as fragile, unworthy creatures, destined only to kneel before the strength of the Falari. But Kale's presence refused to let that belief stand untouched. He was still a prisoner, still bound by chains, but his spirit was never captured. Every word he spoke carried weight. Every glance reminded her of the wound he had left on her armor and on her pride. The other Falari officers had begun to question her choices. Why keep him alive? Why waste food and air on a human when dozens more waited to be crushed on the battlefield? Liara silenced them each time, her tone sharp and commanding. But when she was alone, the doubts returned. She told herself she needed Kale alive to understand humans better, to study their strange willpower, to prepare for the next battle. Yet she knew deep down it was something else, something she did not want to name. One evening she entered his cell, her footsteps heavy with the weight of decision. Kale looked up from where he sat against the wall, his chains rattling softly. His face was tired, but his eyes burned with the same stubborn fire. "You've been fighting again," he said, noticing the faint bruises on her arm. Liara crossed her arms, her voice sharp. "A commander leads from the front. You wouldn't understand." Kale gave a short laugh, though it carried no mockery. "I understand more than you think. I've led men who knew they wouldn't see another sunrise. We fought anyway. That's what leadership means." Her ears twitched at his words. She hated that he spoke like an equal, hated even more that his words touched something inside her. He was supposed to be beneath her, yet he spoke with the authority of someone who had lived through fire and survived. For a long moment, they stared at each other in silence. Then Kale asked a question she had not expected. "What do you see when you look at me? A prisoner? An enemy? Or something you're afraid to admit?" Liara's jaw tightened. The chains between them felt heavier than steel. She wanted to answer with scorn, to remind him that he was nothing but prey in her grasp. But the words refused to leave her lips. Because when she looked at him, she saw none of those things. She saw a warrior. Anger flared in her chest, not at Kale, but at herself. She spun on her heel and left the cell, her heart pounding like drums of war. She had sworn long ago that no human would ever touch her, not her body, not her pride, not her heart. But Kale had already pierced through every barrier she had built. That night, Liara stood in the War Council chamber, her officers presenting strategies for their next assault. Yet her mind was far away, still caught in the echo of Kale's words. She found herself questioning not only him, but also her people. Was their pride truly strength, or was it fear disguised as power? The council dismissed, and one of her most trusted captains approached her privately. "Commander, this human is clouding your judgment. End him before he ends you." The advice should have been sound, yet Liara could not. Something inside told her that killing Kale would not end her conflict. It would only bury questions she was no longer willing to ignore. Later, she returned to his cell once more. Cale met her eyes, and though neither spoke at first, the silence between them carried more than words ever could. In that silence, Liara understood the truth she had been fighting to deny. She had sworn that no human would ever touch her. Yet this one already had, and she could no longer let go. The warship drifted through the void like a predator in silence, yet within its halls tension spread like fire. The Falari warriors grew restless, whispering behind Liara's back. They saw their commander visiting a human prisoner again and again. Some called it weakness. Others called it betrayal. Among her people, to show favor to a human was shameful, unthinkable. But Liara was not swayed by whispers. She carried herself with the same steel in her step, the same fire in her gaze. Outwardly, she was still their proud commander. Inwardly, her heart was divided. Each time she stood before Cale, she felt the walls she had built crumbling. One evening, after a long council, she went to his cell once more. The guards hesitated before unlocking the door, their eyes filled with silent judgment, but none dared to refuse her. Inside, Kyle sat in his usual place, his hands still bound, his expression calm but alert. "You've been thinking," he said quietly as she stepped in. Her glowing eyes narrowed. "What makes you think that?" "Because your soldiers look at you differently," he replied. "And because you've been carrying questions you don't want to answer." She stiffened, her pride resisting his words. Yet they struck true. Liara had always believed strength came from certainty, from unbending resolve. But Cale's presence had shown her another kind of strength, the kind that came from doubt, from questioning, from fighting even when hope was gone. "You humans are reckless," she said, her voice low. "You fight when there is no chance. You refuse to surrender even when it means death. It is foolish." Cale met her gaze steadily. "Or maybe it's what keeps us alive. You think strength is never breaking. I think strength is breaking and standing up anyway." The silence that followed was heavy, but it was not hostile. Liara felt the weight of his words settle inside her chest like a seed taking root. She turned to leave, but before she reached the door, Cale spoke again. "You're not like the others, are you?" She froze. No one had ever dared to say such a thing to her. Slowly, she turned back, her voice sharp. "What do you mean?" Cale's lips curved into the faintest smile. "You see more than they do. You question what they take as truth. That's why you keep me alive. Not because I'm useful, but because I remind you of something you don't want to admit." Her pulse quickened, though she forced her face into its usual mask of control. She wanted to deny it, to silence him with cold words, but her voice refused to obey. Instead, she left the cell without another word, her thoughts tangled like a storm. That same night, her captain confronted her again. "Commander, the crew is losing faith. They whisper that you are distracted, that this human clouds your vision. If you want their loyalty, you must kill him." The demand struck her like a blade. To kill Cale would restore her honor, silence the whispers, and prove her loyalty to her people. But when she imagined striking him down, she felt no triumph, only emptiness. Her silence gave the captain his answer. He bowed stiffly, though she could see suspicion burning in his eyes. Alone once more, Liara walked the dark corridors of the ship until she found herself standing outside Cale's cell again. She did not enter. She only stood there, her hand resting against the cold metal of the door. Inside, Cale lifted his head, sensing her presence even without seeing her. And though neither spoke, the air between them was heavy with unspoken truths. Liara had sworn no human would touch her. Yet she was already bound by a chain far stronger than steel. The Falari High Council summoned Liara. It was unusual for a commander to be called mid-campaign, and the message carried a weight she could not ignore. Leaving her ship under the watch of her captain, she traveled to the great flagship where the council awaited. The chamber was vast, filled with the glow of stars projected on every wall. Seated in a crescent of dark metal thrones were the elders of her people, warriors who had fought and conquered for centuries. Their eyes burned with cold fire as they regarded her. "You have been successful," one elder said. "Your victories have broken human defenses. Soon they will fall completely." Liara bowed her head, though pride did not warm her heart as it once had. Another elder leaned forward, his voice sharp. "And yet whispers reach us, Commander. Whispers of a human you keep alive. Is this true?" Liara's pulse quickened, but her voice remained steady. "Yes. I captured a human soldier. He has given me insight into their ways, knowledge of their resolve. This information may help us crush them faster." The elders murmured among themselves, but one older than the rest fixed his gaze upon her. "Knowledge is one thing, attachment is another. Do not forget, child, humans are beneath us. To grow close to one is weakness, and weakness spreads like poison." She bowed again, hiding the storm that raged in her chest. She told herself she would not falter, that she would obey her people's will. But deep inside, she knew the truth. She could no longer see Kale as prey. When she returned to her ship, her captain was waiting, his face tight with suspicion. "The council knows," he said. "They will not tolerate this much longer." Liara brushed past him, her voice sharp. "I need no reminder of my duty." Yet her steps carried her straight to Kale's cell. He looked up when she entered, his expression calm but searching. "They don't trust you anymore, do they?" She stiffened. "You speak as though you know my people." Kale gave a faint smile. "I don't need to know them. I can see it on your face. They want you to kill me." The words cut through her armor like a blade. For a long moment she said nothing. Then quietly she admitted, "Yes." Kale nodded slowly as if he had expected it. "Then why haven't you?" Liara's hands clenched at her sides. Her voice trembled despite her will. "Because I cannot." The silence that followed was heavy, and in it, something shifted between them. No longer prisoner and commander, no longer prey and predator. Something deeper, unspoken, yet undeniable. But outside their fragile bond, the storm grew darker. The Falari fleet prepared for one final push into human space, and rumors of Liara's weakness spread faster than light. Her captain began to gather support among the crew, whispering that she had betrayed her people for a human. That night, Liara stood alone at the viewing glass of her chamber, staring at the endless stars. Kyle's words, the council's warnings, her captain's threats all pressed upon her. She had sworn that no human would ever touch her. Yet Kyle had touched her heart, and now it threatened to cost her everything. And as the war drums beat louder, she realized a choice was coming. A choice between her people's pride and the human who had shattered every wall she once held sacred. The Falari ship was no longer united. The whispers had grown into open doubt. Warriors who once bowed their heads now glanced at Liara with suspicion, their eyes filled with questions they dared not speak aloud. Her captain, bold and ambitious, moved among them like a shadow, feeding their doubts with careful words. "Humans are weak," he told them, "yet our commander shields one. She spares him when she should break him. Is that strength or betrayal?" Liara knew of these whispers, but she carried herself with the same steel as always. To show weakness was to invite the blade. Still, even her pride could not erase the truth. Her control over the crew was slipping. One evening, alarms shook the ship. Liara rushed to the command deck to find chaos. Her captain stood at the center, his hand on his weapon, a cold fire in his eyes. Around him, several officers had taken positions, their loyalty clearly with him. "Commander," he said, his voice calm but sharp, "your choices have endangered us. The council warned you, yet you refuse to obey. The human must die, or your command ends here." The crew watched, holding their breath. For a moment, silence stretched like a blade between them. Liara's ears twitched, her glowing eyes narrowing. "You dare challenge me?" The captain did not flinch. "I dare save our people from your weakness." Before she could reply, a soldier spoke from the back. If she cannot do what must be done, then perhaps she no longer leads us. The words struck harder than any weapon. Betrayal had rooted itself deep. Liara's hand fell to the hilt of her blade. If you wish to test my strength, then come. But know this. No Falari who raises a weapon against me will live to tell of it. The wire tension broke like a storm. Blades were drawn. The deck filled with the clash of steel and the roar of warriors. Liara fought with the ferocity of a storm, her blade cutting through traitors with precision and fire. But even as she fought, she knew the battle was not just for her life. It was for Kale's. For in the chaos she saw the captain's true aim. He had sent soldiers to the prison deck. They were moving to end Kyle. Rage surged through her. She cut down the last officer before her and sprinted through the halls, her boots striking the metal floors like thunder. The air stank of smoke and blood as she reached the holding cells. There she found them. Warriors standing before Kale's cell, weapons raised. Kale was on his feet, his chains rattling as he braced for the strike he could not stop. Stand down. Liara's voice tore through the chamber like fire. The soldiers hesitated, their eyes flicking between her and their captain's orders. One spat. This human has bewitched you. You would risk your honor for him. Liara's blade flashed, cutting through the lock on Kale's chains instead of their flesh. The sound of metal breaking echoed like thunder. Kale stumbled forward, free at last. Her soldiers gasped. In that single act, Liara had made her choice clear. She stood between Kyle and her warriors, her eyes blazing. Yes, I would. For a heartbeat, the chamber froze. Then the soldiers roared and charged. Liara lifted her blade, Kyle beside her with nothing but broken chains in his hands. Side by side, human and Falari faced the oncoming storm. In that moment, the war inside the ship was no longer about duty or orders or pride. It was about survival. And for the first time, Liara knew she was no longer fighting for her people. She was fighting for him. The prison deck erupted into chaos. Falari soldiers charged, their weapons flashing with deadly light. Liara met them, head on, her blade moving like a storm, each strike fueled by a fire greater than duty. Kale, though unarmed, fought at her side with nothing but broken chains gripped tight in his fists. The warriors expected him to fall quickly, but Kale fought, with the same defiance that had first caught Liara's eye. He struck with raw strength, knocking soldiers back, turning their own momentum against them. He was no Falari, no trained warrior bred for battle, yet his will was unshakable. Liara's heart pounded as she cut through the traitors. For the first time, she fought not only for her people's pride, but for someone she had sworn she would never protect. Every strike she made was a declaration to herself and to the universe. Kale mattered. The last soldier fell, groaning on the floor. Liara turned, her chest heaving, to see Kale standing with blood on his hands, his chains bent and broken. He was wounded, but his eyes still burned with fire. "You saved me," he said, his voice low. Liara's throat tightened. "I had no choice." But she knew it was a lie. She had chosen. And now there was no turning back. The ship's alarms blared, echoing through the halls. The captain's voice crackled through the intercom, sharp and cold. "Liara has betrayed us. She stands with the human. She is no longer our commander. Seize her and kill the human." The ship that had once been hers now turned against her. Warriors loyal to the captain marched through the corridors, hunting them. Liara grabbed Kale's arm and pulled him forward. "We can't stay here," she said. "Where are we going?" he asked. "To the hangar. If we can reach a fighter, we can escape." The two ran through the twisting corridors, the sounds of pursuit close behind. Twice they were cornered, and twice Liara fought her way through. Kale, though weary, refused to slow down. His presence beside her was a strange comfort, a reminder that she was not alone in this fight. At last, they reached the hangar bay. Rows of sleek Falari fighters rested within, their wings folded like blades. But a squad of soldiers was already waiting. The captain himself stood at the front, his weapon drawn, his face twisted with rage. "Traitor," he spat, his eyes burning into Liara. "You've thrown away your honor for a human." Liara raised her blade, her voice steady. "No, I've found something greater than honor. The captain roared and charged, his warriors following. The clash was fierce, the sound of metal and fire filling the hangar. Liara met the captain's strikes with fury, their blades sparking in a storm of light. Around them, Kyle fought off, soldiers with desperate strength, his chains snapping bones and scattering foes. The battle seemed endless, but Liara's determination was stronger. With a final strike, she disarmed the captain, sending his blade clattering across the floor. She stood over him, her own weapon at his throat. The hangar fell silent. Warriors hesitated, unsure whether to fight or flee. The captain's voice shook, with rage. Kill me then. Prove you are nothing but a traitor who chose a human over her people. Liara's blade trembled. She could end him and take the ship for herself, or spare him and risk everything. Before she could choose, Kale's voice cut through the silence. Liara, we have to go. Her eyes met Kale's, and in that moment her decision was clear. She turned, pulling him toward the nearest fighter. They climbed inside, alarms screaming as the engines roared to life. As the ship lifted off, the captain's furious roar echoed behind them. You will be hunted until the stars themselves burn out. The fighter shot out of the hangar into the endless void, leaving behind the only life Liara had ever known. For the first time, she was not Falari commander, not proud warrior, not untouchable. She was something else, something new. And beside her sat the human she had once sworn never to let touch her, now the only one she could not let go. The stolen fighter sped through the void, stars streaking past like rivers of light. Liara gripped the controls with steady hands, though her heart thundered beneath her armor. Behind them, Falari ships had already begun pursuit, their signals echoing across space. She knew her people would not rest until both she and Kale were captured, or destroyed. Beside her, Kale leaned back in the co-pilot seat, his body bruised and weary. Yet his eyes stayed sharp, watching the stars. For the first time since his capture, he was not a prisoner. He was free, and Liara had been the one to make it so. Where are we going? He asked, his voice rough. Liara's ears twitched. Far, enough that they cannot track us. There are uncharted systems beyond this sector. If we can reach them, we may have a chance. Kyle studied her in silence for a moment. Then, with a faint smile, he said, You didn't have to do this. You could have let them kill me. Her hands tightened on the controls. I told myself it was honor that stayed my hand. Then I told myself it was curiosity. But the truth is that I could not lose you. Kyle's smile faded, replaced by something softer, something heavier. And now you've lost everything. Else. The words cut deep, but Liara did not flinch. Perhaps everything I had was never truly mine. Pride, honor, duty, those were chains heavier than the ones they bound you with. Now, for the first time, I am free. For a long moment, the silence between them was filled only by the hum of the engines. But freedom came at a price. Sensors lit up with warnings. Falari ships were closing in. The hunter fleet had found them. Liara pushed the fighter into evasive maneuvers, weaving through asteroid fields and burning thrusters at full strength. Cal braced himself against the seat, his jaw set. They won't stop, she said through clenched teeth. To them I am a traitor, and you are the reason why. Then we'll make them stop, Cal replied. His voice was calm, steady, the same defiance she had seen on the battlefield. Together they fought the pursuers. Liara piloted with the skill of a commander who had lived her life in battle, while Kale manned the weapons. His hands, though unfamiliar with Falari controls, adapted quickly. Each shot he fired drove their enemies back. Each narrow escape proved that the fragile human was far more dangerous than her people believed. Still, the odds were against them. The fighter was fast, but the Falari fleet was relentless. Hours stretched into a blur of running and fighting, until exhaustion pressed heavy on them both. At last, Liara spotted a planet on the edge of the chartless expanse, a dead world cloaked in storms and shadows. We'll hide there, she said, her voice hoarse. The fighter pierced the atmosphere, rattling under the weight of turbulence, before settling in the ruins of a long-dead city. The skies above rumbled with lightning, casting eerie shadows across broken towers. It was no safe haven, but it was shelter. As the engines cooled, silence filled the cockpit. Kyle leaned forward, resting his head against the console, his breaths ragged. Liara turned to him, her glowing eyes softening. "You should rest," she said quietly. He looked at her, and for the first time there was no defiance in his gaze, only trust. "I will. But only if you promise not to leave me." Liara's chest tightened. "I will not." They sat there for a moment, the storm raging outside, the silence between them heavy with unspoken truths. Liara had sworn no human would ever touch her. Yet now, sitting beside Kyle in the wreckage of their world, she realized he already had, and she no longer wished to let go. The storm raged across the dead world, lightning tearing through the sky like the anger of gods. In the ruins below, Liara and Kyle prepared for the inevitable. The Falari fleet would not give up. They would track the fighters' trail, they would search the planet, and when they found them, there would be no mercy. Kyle sat against a broken pillar, his body still aching from battle. He cleaned a wound on his arm with a strip of cloth, his movement steady despite the pain. Liara watched him, her blade resting across her knees, her glowing eyes reflecting the flashes of lightning. "You shouldn't waste your strength," she said quietly. He gave a faint smile. "If I don't, you'll waste yours worrying about me." Her ears twitched, but she did not argue. Instead, she looked out at the horizon where shadows moved in the storm. The Falari were coming. "They will kill us both," she said. Kale's gaze sharpened. "Then we make them pay for every step." Liara studied him for a long moment. In his eyes, she saw the same defiance that had first struck her heart, the same fire that had shaken her pride. She realized then that Kale was not just a soldier. He was proof of everything her people feared about humanity, fragile in body, unbreakable in spirit. When the enemy came, they came in numbers. Warriors poured through the ruins, their voices rising in battle cries, their weapons flashing in the stormlight. Liara rose to meet them, her blade singing through the air. Kyle fought at her side, wielding a scavenged spear with raw strength and desperate skill. Together, they became a force the Falari had not expected. Liara's precision and Kale's unyielding defiance turned the ruins into a graveyard for their enemies. For every warrior that fell, two more rushed forward, yet they stood their ground. The captain himself arrived at last, his face twisted with fury. "You should have died with honor, Liara. Instead, you choose shame." Liara's voice was steady as steel. "No, I chose truth." Their blades clashed in the heart of the storm. Sparks flew, thunder shook the sky, and the ground trembled beneath their strikes. Kale fought off the soldiers who tried to overwhelm her, his body bruised and bloodied, but he refused to fall. At last, Liara found her opening. With a roar, she struck the captain down, her blade piercing through his guard. He fell to the ground, his eyes wide with disbelief. The remaining Falari hesitated, shaken by the sight of their leader's fall. Liara stood tall, her blade dripping with rain and blood, Kale at her side. "Leave," she commanded, her voice echoing through the ruins. "Tell the council that I am no longer theirs. I am my own." For a long moment, silence hung heavy. Then one by one the warriors withdrew, their loyalty shattered, their pride broken. The storm swallowed them as they fled back to the sky. When the battlefield was quiet at last, Liara turned to Kale. He was on his knees, his body shaking from exhaustion, but his eyes were still burning with that same fire. She reached out, her armored hand trembling, and helped him to his feet. "You swore no human would touch you," he said softly. Liara's lips curved into the faintest smile. "And now I cannot let go." Together they stood in the ruins of a broken world, bound not by chains or duty but by choice. The storm raged on above them, but for the first time, Liara felt no fear. She had lost her place among her people, her honor, her old life. But in Kyle she had found something greater, and in the vast endless galaxy that was enough.